things changed at the University of Idaho. The once sleepy campus saw increased police patrols, and the national media arrived on scene. But despite being in the spotlight for such a terrible crime, the university has actually attracted more. This in 2022, the university had the largest class of freshmen enroll at the university. And just a year later, they followed that with the second largest class of freshmen in school history.
I'm going to play that again.
The days after the murders, things changed at the University of Idaho. The once sleepy campus saw increased police patrols, and the national media arrived on scene. But despite being in the spotlight for such a terrible crime, the university has actually attracted more. This in 2022, the university had the largest class of freshmen enroll at the university. And just a year later, they followed that with the second largest class of freshmen in school history. Retention of students is also up more than 1% year after year. And national statistics show undergraduate enrollment is down across the country since the pandemic. But the total enrollment at the University of Idaho climbed in 2023 to nearly 12,000 students.
They liked his sales pitch. Makes sense? The sales pitch. Talk about this a year from now, because you know the trial ain't going to be done. It probably ain't even going to be started in a year. When we talk about this from a year from now, watch. It's going to be up. They said 12,000. Watch. Next year when they're reporting these numbers, you're going to hear 15. Or higher.
And then this afternoon, the State Board of Education unanimously voted to allow the U of I to go through with the plan. News Channel 7's Jude Binkley was at the board meeting today. He brings us what this means for the University of Idaho.
Well,
things have never been better.
U of I will be able to move forward with their proposal to create a nonprofit entity that would buy the University of Phoenix for $550 million.
Aye.
Superintendent Crucial. Aye.
The motion carries.
The State Board of Education giving the University of Idaho a thumbs up to create a nonprofit called New U to acquire the University of Phoenix. During the
A nonprofit, people. Nonprofit means tax breaks. That's what I'm saying. They're using taxable and non-taxable bonds to pay for this. Where do you think that money comes from? It ain't coming from the university except for that much. It's coming from the state and the local. How does it come in that form? It comes in that form from taxes. What happens to a community when you add more taxes onto it? When you already don't allow it to flourish like you flourish? The roof that needed to be replaced 15 years ago is now not getting replaced until 25 years or maybe 30. It's bullshit. It's bullshit.
University of Idaho a thumbs up to create a nonprofit called New U to acquire the University of Phoenix. During the state board meeting, U of I President Scott Green talked about the strategy behind buying the online for-profit university.
By affiliating with the University of Phoenix, the U of I has a chance to engage a new and growing student population, older working adults. Through the technological infrastructure of the University of Phoenix, expanding programmatic offerings and building on our synergies, we can even better.
This guy. And he even said, typically this is not how because there was a lot of blowback when it came to this deal. There's a lot of blowback when it came to this deal. You had senators, you had governors, you had local politicians are like, whoa, something, because there was too much being closed up and sealed. Too much. The way that it happened, how quick it happened, there was too many questions. If it was even a legit deal, They were asking questions. It was suspicious from the very beginning. Even Scott Green said, typically this is not how I would do a deal, but sometimes you got to make business decisions. Exact quote. But sometimes you got to make business decisions. Enrollment. Business decisions.
Reaching more students across Idaho through affordable online education is a need the state board agreed is crucial.
The Higher Ed Task Force said a high priority was to have a platform that would reach to rural and remote Idaho.
Ticket
level
number
the playing field for
84,
all of our
Tiffany.
citizens in terms
Ticket
of higher
84.
education.
The $550 million to buy the University of Phoenix would be raised with bonds issued by New U, not taxpayer dollars. The University of Phoenix would transition into a nonprofit.
Non-taxpayer, but you said taxable bonds. That's tax.
Would transition into a nonprofit. Some community
What? Hold on a minute.
University of Phoenix would be raised with bonds issued by New U, not taxpayer dollars.
Oh, yeah. They're not using the taxpayer dollars to issue the bonds. They're using the tax on the bonds and the bonds themselves. Who do you think buys the bonds? Who do you think buys the bonds? Why am I disappearing? What the hell's going on? Who do you think buys the bonds? Taxable and non-taxable. You should have mentioned that, reporter.
The University of Phoenix would transition into a nonprofit. Some community members have expressed concern
In transition to a non-profit. I'm going to share this link with you guys. Let's get into this later tonight. Transitioning to a non-profit. Huh?
concerns over the online university's reputation. Just last month, a deal for the University of Arkansas to buy the University of Phoenix was shot down.
We think they're very, very good people. We understand there's been problems in the past, and people were right.
The deal was shot down. And then he says they happen to be very, very good people. So what? The University of Arkansas was going to buy the business because listen, when you're dealing with businesses, right? There's excuse me. There's a certain point in business, okay, when you get to a position where you made an agreement to purchase the company. It's that time where you go into the books. Because before it's like 100% completely final, the business that's purchasing the other business then finally gets to go through all the books. Like everything. And I wonder if that's why it was shot down, because then Mr. Green says, these people happen to be good people. So was it already a scandalous business already? And it's one of those things where if you're an NFL team, you're going to pick a top draft pick that just had knee surgery? Listen, we need to win now. I'm going to take that quarterback that just had a torn ACL. First pick. If ends up injured in training camp, hey, we tried. Is this one of those deals where it's like, yo, we know there's a fucking torn ACL in these books, metaphorically speaking, not literal. We're going to go ahead and take that shot. Because what's the worst that could happen? The deal goes bust and we end up with less enrollment, that's probably where it was headed anyway. So we're just going to take our shot and take our chance and see if us purchasing this not only keeps us parallel to where we were at, but if not parallel, it takes us beyond the parallel. So it's like picking that top draft pick that had a torn ACL, and you're heading to the playoffs. You ain't at the Super Bowl yet, but you're heading to the playoffs. You're not at the playoffs yet. The playoffs is the trial. The Super Bowl is the verdict. That's interesting. That's the first time I've seen him with glasses. Some Harry Carey glasses. That's crazy.
Upset with them, for past behaviors, but it is our opinion in dealing with them and going through our due diligence that they're on a very different path now.
The University of Phoenix has 85,000 students. If the purchase goes through, U of I and the University of Phoenix would operate separately, but could collaborate in the future.
85,000. 85,000. And how many more are just going to do the University of Phoenix / Idaho just because it's the University of Idaho? Add another 15 onto that and make it 100. Make it 100.
Now, other public universities have bought online schools before, like Purdue, which bought Kaplan University, now known as Purdue Global. Now, this deal still has to be approved by accreditors and get nonprofit approval. And if those go through, the purchase is expected to be completed early next year.
It's a win-win for both institutions. All right, Jude.
Wednesday, news broke that the University of Idaho has been in talks for months to acquire the University of Phoenix for $550 million. On Thursday, just one day after that news became public, the State Board of Education unanimously approved a request from UI to form a nonprofit that would handle that acquisition. Here to discuss is Kevin Richert of Idaho Education News. Kevin, it's been quite a week.
It really has been. And this news about U of I and University of Phoenix came from out of nowhere. And we're just now starting to come to grips with the enormity of this transaction. This is a $550 million.
Yeah, this thing came out of nowhere. It's mostly sealed up. Scott Green says, normally I wouldn't do, or just, this is not how I would go about it, but you got to make business decisions. It came right from his freaking mouth.
Purchase. It involves $685 million of bonding to cover everything. That is about as much as we're going to spend.
8,500, and I bet you it gets to over 100. Bet.
As a state on the four-year colleges and universities
over
in 2023, 24. It is a staggering amount of money, and it is a process that has unfolded in rapid fire over the past 48 hours.
You touched on this briefly, but this money isn't coming from just cash on hand that the university has. This is from bonds that the nonprofit will acquire.
Right. The separate entity, the nonprofit New U, would be doing the bonding to acquire the project, to acquire University of Phoenix. And the University of Idaho has been careful to say that there's no taxpayer money involved in the bonding. There is some financial risk, though, for the university.
Let's talk a little bit about that financial risk. What does it look like?
See, they're careful. That's why that last video we almost saw almost fooled. It's like, why didn't you report that they were from non-taxable and taxable bonds when you said bonds? To sit there and say that this money isn't going to be coming from the community or being taxed on the community is a fucking lie. It's a lie.
The project to acquire University of Phoenix, and the University of Idaho has been careful to say that there's no taxpayer money involved in the bonding. There is some financial
Verbiage.
risk, though, for the university.
Let's talk a little
Verbiage.
bit about that financial.
Yeah, not much. And did you see how he looked up at the frickin' camera there real quick? He knew what he said isn't going to be liked by the... Watch his fucking eyes. He knew what he said wasn't going to be liked. He's saying what he's saying. Wait till the camera zooms back with that shot, and then he looks at, like, yep, I just said it. People ain't gonna like it. He's done talking. Zooms back. Looks up. Yeah. Yeah. They're not going to like what I just said. Again, I'll play what he said again. Yeah, they're not going to like what I just said. Kind of like when Vargas looked up when she was asked about the DNA stuff in that court hearing. Remember that?
Money isn't coming from just cash on hand that the university has. This is from bonds that the nonprofit will acquire.
Right.
Oh,
the separate entity, the nonprofit New U, would be doing the bonding to acquire the project, to acquire University of Phoenix. And the University of Idaho has been careful to say that there's no taxpayer money involved in the bonding. There is some financial risk, though, for the university.
Let's talk a little bit about that financial risk. What does it look like, and how do we get there? What's the path to see that risk?
The path would come if New U was unable to make its payments to cover the purchase of University of Phoenix. At that point, the university would step in to the tune of up to $10 million per year
$10 million
to backstop those payments. Now,
that's what I was telling you guys. Are $10 million a year. $10 million freaking dollars. $10 million. This is a good... the shit that happens in local politics, man. Because you know that's what it is. It's local politics. Ugh, those poor frickin' community members, man. They should be flourishing just as much as the University of Idaho. Every single bit, that community should be flourishing.
Now, that is a fail-safe, and it's not immediately clear to me exactly where within the university's budget that's going to come, if that were to come to pass.
There are a lot of things that aren't clear.
There's a
for
lot
now,
we're still
certainly.
trying to sort out here.
One of the questions that I had was, New U, this nonprofit that was the university is forming to handle, they're bonding with state authority.
Correct.
How can it do that and taxpayers not be on the hook?
That's a really good question. I mean,
right?
I think there's a lot of governance questions. There's a lot of...
And why is it all sealed up? So they don't...
process questions that we're trying to sort out. And really, what we had on Thursday, the state board met for 90 minutes before voting unanimously to give the U of I the go-ahead to proceed on this purchase. There were a lot of nitty-gritty questions that were being asked in that meeting, to be fair. But a lot of it was focused on the money flow. How is the University of Idaho going to make money off of this deal? And we really haven't talked about that yet. How would that backstop that $10 million fail-safe kick? And that was really the focus of the meeting. These process questions, these governance questions are still, still questions we need to sort out.
One more question on the governance issue. So the two universities will operate independently. They'll have separate leadership and presidents. But this separate nonprofit entity, New U, it's still connected to the University of Idaho, to be clear. I mean, its address is the Kibbe Dome in Moscow.
Right. And the individual heading the New U board at this point appears to be the counsel for the university. So the connections between New U and U of I are pretty clear.
At Thursday's meeting, one of the board members touched on this, but University of Phoenix doesn't have the best reputation nationally and hasn't for some time. Even if UI is...
See what I'm saying? That's what I happen to think they're good people. All of a sudden, the deal got shot down. Why? Because you finally opened up the books and somebody was like, whoa, hot potato. Hot potato. Mr. Green took a pay cut to go to the University of Idaho. You don't think he would... You don't think if his practices, his risky moves don't work out, you don't think that he can just chill and retire? You don't think that he can go get his old and... You're good. We'll be ending the show here in a few minutes. But we'll be back tonight, 6:30 Central, 7:30 Eastern, going into a lot more stuff. For sure, though, we'll be starting off with the digital forensic. And we're going to be looking at more of this new U stuff. But yeah, she says it right there. Their history is sketchy.
Of Idaho, to be clear. I mean, its address is the Kibbe Dome in Moscow.
Right, and the individual heading the new U board at this point appears to be the counsel for the university. So the connections between new U and U of I are pretty clear.
Counsel for the
At Thursday's
university.
meeting, one of the board members touched on this, but University of Phoenix doesn't have the best reputation nationally and hasn't for some time. Even if UI isn't financially on the hook for these issues, what's the potential hit to UI's reputation here when it acquires this for-profit entity?
I think that's something that the U of I is really going to have to work on. I think that the messaging and the framing of this merger, let's call it a merger for lack of a better word.
These people right here are depending on the honest words coming from those people, just like people are depending on honest words from the investigation. This is as secretive and as shady as the case itself. This must just be how shit goes. I mean, hell, when we were listening to Idaho lawyers, when they actually would talk on YouTube channels or local news, they were saying when it came to the coroner representing a defendant that she also was the coroner for the victim. What's the conflict of interest? Listen, you let me know when you know what the conflict of interest is. You tell me, and it's like, what? This is just more of how shit goes. And these people are having to blindly trust the deal like they're having to blindly trust the Christmas stocking that looks like it's full of Kit Kats and Hot Wheels. And unfortunately, it seems to be a bunch of crumpled up paper.
On the hook for these issues, what's the potential hit to UI's reputation?
Please hit the like if you haven't yet. It's the free way to help. I appreciate that.
I think that's something that the U of I is really going to have to work on. I think that the messaging and the framing of this merger, let's call it a merger for lack of a better word, that's going to be something that the U of I is going to have to deal with. Now, Scott Green, the president of the U of I, talked about the reputational issues on Thursday, and he acknowledged
they're good people.
The University of Phoenix has had problems in the past.
But
he insists that this new team that really wants to go the nonprofit route, really wants to get back to nonprofit education, student-centric service, he thinks that they're wanting to turn the page as much as the U of I wants to partner with an online vendor. So we'll see. But, if you watch social media over the past couple of days, everybody has a wisecrack about this merger and about the University of Phoenix. And fair or unfair, that's something the U of I is going to have to combat over the next few months or years.
I think the least negative reaction I saw
And then the way he looks after that one.
was, well, that's weird.
We'll be going into this one. We'll be going into this again tonight too. Trust me.
Most of the reaction that I have seen, and I, I went to the university. I still have, so many friends and connections there, and there was a lot of frustration with how this happened secretly. The University of Phoenix compelled University of Idaho to sign a non-disclosure agreement.
Right.
So these talks have been going on for months, even though we have only known about it for 48 hours.
Right. We had the 3 executive sessions involving the State Board of Education dating back to March, while the university was operating under the NDA. That was a question that came up in the State Board meeting on Thursday. President Green said, look, in order to have a conversation with the University of Phoenix, we had to go the NDA route. But I think that is leaving...
So people didn't see what the hell was going on that the fucking people in Arizona saw that went, nope. They didn't want you to see.
A lot of people with questions, a lot of people
They
with
didn't want
skepticism.
you to go.
One of those people,
You
by the
ain't
way,
doing
was
that, do you?
Representative John Gannon, Democrat
You ain't
from
doing
Boise.
that,
He
do
sat
you?
in on the meeting. He was sitting next to me during the State Board meeting on Thursday. He didn't comment. There was no public comment, period, during the State Board meeting on Thursday. Afterwards, he wrote a letter to the State Board expressing his concerns about this process. The secrecy, the kind of take it or leave it. We've got to do this week in order to get an application into the University of Phoenix's accreditors by Friday, today, 2 days out from when this became public.
2 days from when it became public. Two days before it became public. Wow, the secrecy, the offering to the public, and the quickness of the quote deal. What is this? Shady shit 101? The Cliffnotes to Shady shit 101. We're not going to like study the whole book of Shady shit 101. We're just going to get the Cliff Notes of Shady shit 101 and just use those and just apply it to everything. The Shady shit 101 Cliff Notes. For everything. What color is the Cliff Notebook? Golden black.
His concern is this is secret. It's kind of got a take it or leave it aspect to it.
Notes.
And this isn't the right way to be going about this.
And he isn't the only lawmaker who shared those concerns. I watched the board meeting online. The YouTube channel still had the chat function going, and I saw Representative Mike Kingsley in there, a Republican from Lewiston, who was upset about the same thing, the lack of transparency and the lack of input from lawmakers.
This might be the first time that you're seeing questions about transparency being raised on the same project by the Idaho Statesman's Editorial Board and the Idaho Freedom Foundation. So if nothing else, the University of Idaho is bringing people together.
You know what? As an alum, I appreciate that. And real quick, before we move on,
we're bringing people together. Come on, we have 2 days to make this deal. We have a non-disclosure agreement. We can't show you the books. We can't show you the money flow, the negativity, the positivity. We can't show you the reports. We can't show you shit. You got 2 days to sit there and see if this is okay. Like I said a little bit ago, these people are having to trust it blindly, just like the judge was when they signed the warrant for the arrest. Because you know damn well that warrant wasn't signed until the DNA was thrown on there. Let's be honest. No, come back with more. No, come back with more. Oh, okay. You got DNA? Okay. Shady shit 101. They just did the cliff notes though.
Let's talk about the pluses that President Scott Green was advocating for in this meeting. You know, this has the potential to generate a lot of income for the University of Idaho if it goes well.
Right, and it's still not completely clear to me anyway about how this money all flows. But the way the thing is structured is that the first $10 million of revenue goes straight to the U of I that they can use for strategic initiatives. The university is saying,
the university says we want the first 10 million. Man.
We think there's going to be a lot more that comes through, that their cash flow is much more favorable than that. So 10 million is really just a starting point. You know, they were talking about upwards of $170 million of revenue for the university by the year 2030. There's a lot of money at stake here. And I think
if you're not trying to sell a shady, dude, do you not think there's going to be shady shit that comes with shady deals, that comes with shady notice, that comes with shady planning, that comes with shady details? Oh, boy. They know what to do. It's Cliff Notes. They know what to do. They just use the same approach on everything.
I think really for the university and for the state board, one of the things that they keep pointing to is we need to come up with an online education system in this state. This is maybe the quickest way to do it because University of Phoenix has that platform already in place. It's been in existence for years.
And the state board and University of Idaho were already moving forward with an online platform, Online Idaho, to kind of address some of those concerns, right?
Which the U of I says is still going to be in place. It's still going to be operating as a separate entity, and the U of I's own online classes will continue to operate. So the U of I is really trying to, set up a lot of walls here between its operations and the University of Phoenix's operations.
Well, so many questions that we will be looking for answers for over the coming months.
Just getting started here.
President Green, if you want to join us, we would love to have you. So moving on, in other higher education news, this week, tuition freezes at those 4-year higher education institutes in Idaho are no longer. What's going on with that? What do we know?
We know that tuition and fees are going to go up at the 4-year schools by about $400 per year per student. It'll vary a little bit, a few dollars here and there by institutions. This was a 3-year tuition freeze. It was instituted, if you recall, right before the pandemic. So it's really hard to tell how that really worked. It's hard to differentiate what happened with student tuition, what happened to, how did students make decisions about whether or not to go to college? How did the freeze factor and how did the pandemic factor in? At any rate, what we did see over these 3 years was, the dip in enrollment during the pandemic, a rebound, almost back to pre-pandemic levels in these 3 years of the freeze. But what you heard on Monday from the state board, and a state board meeting that now feels like happened 3 months ago, board members and university leaders all said, we're reluctant to do this, but we don't see much of a choice because inflation is really hitting the institutions. The cost of pay raises and trying to offset staff turnover, that hits the universities directly because the pay raises instituted by the legislature this year were not fully funded by the legislature. So what you heard on Monday was the board.
Oh, this is all so shady.
We have no choice here.
Briefly,
we have no choice
have
here.
New news on North Idaho.
We have no choice here, but let's raise the prices even. Oh my Lord!
College and its ongoing saga about the potential for its accreditation.
You're making record. You're making record. The community.
To be pulled. What do we know?
We saw a report from the accreditation team that came out on Thursday.
And the poor community, man. This is so
NIC has made some progress. We've seen some improvements in these past few weeks.
If I could be a politician.
In response to the accreditation concerns. But what you saw in that report was the writer of the report saying it has to sustain. It can't just be a one-off. We've got to see a continued commitment on the college's behalf. Some interesting stuff, though, in that report, too. Quantifying the cost of enrollment declines at North Idaho College, a $500,000 hit this year, another $500,000 hit next year. And interestingly, in the report,
500K.
two of the trustees said this is not a long-term strategic initiative that the college should be taking on, reversing these enrollment declines that have been going on for a decade that really have a bottom line impact on the college.
Lots going on there for sure. In public schools, K
This
through
is so
12,
shady.
school bonds and levies, there were a number on the ballot.
Yeah. Where do you think the money's? It's coming from there too.